Welcome to the Uncertainties of University, a podcast created for the Suffolk University Summer Youth Symposium of 2021. My name is Abigail Thaberge. I use she/her pronouns, and I will be your host for the next 15 minutes. Joining me will be Christiana McKenzie, who uses she/her pronouns, and Tiayona Peaks, who uses she/her pronouns, incoming freshmen at Suffolk University. All of our sources can be found in the description box below. During this podcast, we will explore the racism and sexism that perpetuates the standardized testing and interview portion of the college admissions process. We will have interviews with experts on the college admission process, and we'll dive down deep into research that has been done exposing the prejudice of the College Board and the biases hidden within the interview process. Welcome to Episode 2. Recommendations, Interviews, and Fees. Oh my! Another part of college admissions with roots in racism is the interview process. While several colleges offer interviews as part of the admission process, the Ivy Leagues in particular are especially notorious for using them. The history of Ivy League interviews is none too pretty. They functioned as a tool to make exclusive schools even more exclusive. In the 1920s and 30s, they were originally put in practice to identify undesirable traits in applicants, signs of being Jewish in particular. Interviews in combination with race and religious questions on their applications allowed Ivy Leagues to reject students they thought would harm their reputation and accept more of those who would supposedly uplift it, heterosexual, white, rich, masculine, athletic men who would socialize with more of their kind. Although it has been refined over the years, the interview process at Ivy League schools is largely the same today. Personal character is currently one of the most important factors in an application, not only at Ivy Leagues but colleges all over the country. With such a horrid history and an ambiguous definition of what makes a student worthy, one wonders how these schools judge students today in interviews.
Of course, the entire nature of an interview is subjective, from the questions asked to the student's answers to the report that the interviewer submits at the end of the day. Although interviews are supposed to get to know a student on a more personal level. Sadly, though, the opposite effect can occur if the interviewer is not careful. Often, subjectivity can cause interviews to make hasty, uninformed decisions about your interviewee based on a gut feeling rather than any solid evidence. Relying on intuition like this can cause a halo effect, focusing on someone's good traits so much that you ignore the bad ones, and vice versa. Ivy League interviewers are no stranger to the halo effect. A few uncovered Harvard interviewer notes from the 1980s read, "This young woman could be one of the brightest applicants in the pool, but there are several references to shyness, and seems a tad frothy, and short with big ears." How infuriating would it be to get rejected from your dream school just because the interviewer was so hung up on your physical appearance that they failed to realize any of your good qualities as a student? If interviewers are not specially trained in which questions to ask and how to interpret the answers, then bias can easily leak in and affect the report.
The provided descriptions of prejudice in interviews thus far are examples of explicit bias. These schools consciously decide that certain races, religions, and characteristics were undesirable and empathetically turned those students away. In modern times, however, that kind of clear prejudice is unacceptable, especially on behalf of a school. Nevertheless, bias still worms its way into the interviewing process, often without the interviewer even realizing it's there. Implicit bias comes from unconscious associations we form about certain groups of people and can affect the way we interact with them. For example, An implicit bias against women may cause an interviewer to assume that a student is weaker or less intelligent because she is a woman. An implicit bias against a minority race may cause the interviewer to assume a minority student is uneducated or dangerous. An experiment involving millions of volunteers in 2012 revealed that 70% of people have an implicit racial preference for white people. When considered in the context of the halo effect, split-second decisions about whether the student is good or a bad candidate are very likely initiated and strengthened by the interviewer's unconscious biases. Therefore, student interviews continue to allow discrimination to leak into the admissions process, albeit more quietly than in decades past.
Welcome to the segment of our podcast that we call the Roundtable, where we have a discussion with a group of college students who have experience with the college application process. Today, our subject is the racism and sexism that's found in the college interview process. Do you want to go around and introduce yourselves?
I'm Maddy. I am a freshman at Suffolk University. I am part of the class of 2025, and my current major is Global and Cultural Communications, and I'm hoping to minor in East Asian Studies.
Hi, I'm Tara. I'm also a freshman at Suffolk, and my current major is psychology.
Hello, I'm Christiana. I'm a freshman at Suffolk, and my major is history with a concentration in U.S. history.
Hi, my name's Tiayona, and I'm a freshman at Suffolk, and my major is undecided yet. I'm just here for the ride.
And my name is Abby. I'm also a freshman at Suffolk. I am majoring in political science with a concentration in American politics and hopefully a minor in international relations. So, you know how everyone tells you to be yourself for interviews? Did you know that could actually harm you? Our first discussion question is, have you had an experience being interviewed for college admissions? And if so, did you ever feel that they were discriminatory?
I was interviewed for an Ivy League, and the interview itself went all right, but there were some things that I kind of picked out. For example, they asked you to dress nicely and look presentable for this meeting, which I understand that they want you to show that you care about this and you want to put the best version of yourself forward, but I was thinking that some people can't afford nice clothes. So if you are going into this meeting in the best you have, but what is good enough, you know? What else? Okay, so there was a part of the interview where I was asking about the clubs in the college, which I think is a pretty normal question. I want to get involved in some kind of art club maybe, or something to do with culture. But I didn't specify what kind of clubs because I thought it was pretty obvious. But the guy who interviewed me, he kind of got nervous and weirded out by my question, and he asked me what kind of clubs, because apparently at Princeton there is something called the eating clubs, which are basically these super exclusive clubs with a bunch of powerful rich students and their friends, some kind of elite frat. And these clubs were really big and very problematic at one point, although I think it's died down. But it seemed like he was worried that I was asking that I wanted to get into Princeton just to join these clubs or something. And at this point, I had already expressed how I like wanted, I was looking at Princeton because they had good scholarship programs, and I was really trying to do the best for my family. And I had already told them my parents' immigrant struggle story. So I thought it was kind of clear that I was not really in the rich scene. I was pretty worried at the fact that he seemed like he seemed to get the impression that I wanted to, worm my way in there to get into those elite circles.
Nasty. That is very grody. I do
Yeah,
not like that.
That's something else. I really don't like that one. Does anybody else have any interview experience that they want to talk about? I think the only thing that I have is that I was interviewed for the honors college at one of the colleges that I applied to. But it was after I had been offered admission to the college itself. So I guess it was sort of related to the application process, but it was sort of more for specifically the honors college. And I know that from what it seemed like to me, it seemed like they were trying to be welcoming to other people and trying to, make sure that we all felt comfortable with the school and sort of knew what the environment was like, what campus life was like. So they were trying to be as welcoming as they could be. I never noticed an air of sort of discrimination, but it was also like a public university in a pretty big state. So I wasn't sort of dealing with that exclusivity that Tara had dealt with when she was applying to Ivy Leagues. And so I feel like that's definitely a part of it, is sort of that exclusivity factor of, well, what are these schools looking for? And, how diverse are they? And sort of what are they trying to welcome into their school or unfortunately prevent, which I think is definitely sort of an interesting thing to think about when we think about these things. Now, I know that only a few of us have had experience with college interviews, but do you personally believe that interviews help in the admissions process? And you all can answer even if you haven't been interviewed.
I think to an extent, yes. Like if there's kind of a student where you're not like where they're kind of on the fence of being admitted or not, I think that could be helpful. But I think a good way to try to like curb the classism and racism would be to have it over the phone where you can't see the other person. That could, mitigate some of the issue. But the whole like dress nice thing, yeah, that reeks of classism. And like like nice clothes are expensive as hell.
I feel it depends on who is the interviewer. I know some schools, the interviewer is an alumni. I feel it would be more beneficial possibly if the interviewer was an admissions counselor.
Yeah, I'm with you. I had done after I gotten into Suffolk? No, I had already applied to Suffolk, but I hadn't gotten in yet. But I had opted in for like an optional interview, so they weren't required. I just said like, hey, do you mind if I schedule an interview and sort of like come up when I visit campus? And so I had gone up and I was meeting with, I think, an admissions counselor, someone from the admissions office. And that was definitely really helpful. And this sort of falls into my sort of advice that I have for students going into the interview. But it was nice because it allowed me to ask questions. And so I was able to ask about, what sort of extracurriculars there were and how the honors program was and things like that. So I was able to sort of ask those questions and get to know a little bit more about the school while I was there. And so I don't know, because I think if you're looking at it from an admissions counselor's point of view, it definitely helps you sort of get to know the person sort of behind all the paperwork and things like that. But I think also we have to be careful when we talk about these things, because again, that racism and that sexism that shows up, and especially with the racism against Jewish people and minorities from the Ivy Leagues, is you have to be sort of incredibly sensitive when you talk about these things, because I think for certain people they can help. And so maybe for me, a white woman, they would be helpful, but for other students, they could maybe harm their chances. And so, because of those unconscious biases or whatever else seeps into that college interview process. So I think it's definitely something to consider deeply, because I think it depends on who your interviewer is and who's being interviewed.
Yeah, I think personally there's just too much room for bias to seep in, and if you're like even just like the smallest things, like the way somebody talks or the words they use, can like change somebody's perspective and blow other traits out of proportion. And honestly, one big problem I have with the interview process is that you don't know what the interviewer thought of you. Like you can't read the notes. Like a lot of times they ask you to like waive your right to see the interview notes if you're going to be interviewed, which I think is just so sketchy. Like I understand that they want to be able to express themselves honestly and how they thought about the interview, but if there is some chance of me being discriminated against, like I want a chance to speak up against that, but I don't get that chance because I don't ever get to see the notes.
I feel the same way, like when it comes to like colleges sending you letters saying that you can't get in. And I'm like, so you're telling me you're gonna send me spam my email from the time that I entered my senior year in high school? You're gonna send me mail telling me about your application process. I'm gonna finally apply and kick out that money for your application fee, and you can't even tell me why you're telling me no. It's just a straight up no. And I'm like, I feel like colleges fail to realize how much that really destroys their students. Like these kids are putting their life and soul into, and stressing themselves out for 11 plus years because, being an advanced student, due to the whole standardized testing that we talked about in the last episode, you're known if you're an honor student. If you're an honor student from like first grade. So from the first grade to the 12th grade, which is about 11 years, maybe more, you're breaking your back trying to get good grades to get into a college that'll just tell you no, and you don't even know why.
Yeah, I think that sort of secretiveness and exclusivity of it all is really just so awful. And I wish that schools could be more open with that sort of stuff. And that, we could sort of figure out why. Because every year I see like YouTube videos about like how to game the college application process. And it's never like how to write a good essay. It's just that it's literally a numbers problem. And so whether or not you get into a certain school, for example, I applied to Boston University and I got denied because in their letter they told me they had 75,000 applicants. That's a lot, because if we're combining the students who graduated in 2020, took a gap year and applied as a freshman this year, they were added to our applicant pool. If I had applied like 3 years ago, maybe I would have gotten into BU, but because I applied this year, my chances were null. And so it's just one of those things where like I wish that it wasn't such a numbers game.
I mean, at least they told you it was a numbers thing. Like some application processes just sit here and they pull something random out of the air and put it on a piece of paper.
Yeah, and it's just like so whack. And for example, like I applied to Northeastern, and I was a legacy, and they don't consider it legacy in their thing, but in my denial letter, it was like, We thank you for all that your family has done for the university. If you would like to transfer next year, boo. And I was like, hold up, wait. So you're going to deny me. You're going to say thank you for all your family has done, and then you're going to offer me to transfer? Like, you denied me the first time. Why would I want to transfer to you? You don't like me. Like, this does not.
That
This
makes
isn't
no sense.
Don't you have to apply for a
Yes,
transfer?
yeah, you have to apply
So if you
again.
denied me the first time, what makes you think I'm gonna sit here and put all my apples in one basket a second time?
Yes, so that was like, I was like, are you kidding me? Because that's just ridiculous. And so I don't know, because like for those schools I didn't interview. So then I'm like, well, maybe if they interviewed it would have gone differently, or maybe not. Maybe it would have hurt me. And so it's just one of those things that you're just like, you never know, because it's such a strange, like up in the air type of thing that you sort of have to really think deeply about. And it seems like this sort of game, which is really unfortunate, because I wish that they would be able to help students more.
I only had one interview, and I can't remember if it was with Duke or UNC. All I know is was like she was this very laid back Asian woman, and I want to say it was UNC, because if you walk around the UNC campus, you'll see like a huge amount. It's like a huge amount of Asians at that school. That school is not, like, respectfully, it's known for letting in more Asians than anything else, which is, it's not weird, because it's a school of medicine. It's one of the very top medicine, one of the very high class medicine schools on the East Coast. So depending on if their major is medicine, that's probably why they're there. So yeah, that being said, I remember I sat here and was getting like interview questions from her, asking her questions, answering her questions. And I remember I asked her, I was like, so she was like, do you have any questions for me? I was like, be completely honest. What are the chances of me getting into this school? And then she just looked utterly dumbfounded by the question. She was just like, I mean, I honestly, I'm an alumni. I don't know. It's been a while since I, actually, yeah, but like, she just kept trying to change the subject about how good the school was and how they really have a knack for picking people out who are good for the school. And I was like, can you just keep it straight with me? Like, if you don't think I'm gonna get in, just say that.
Yeah. Another part, at least at my school, they would have representatives from colleges and universities come and visit. And I feel like that's another kind of piece that can fit into the classism puzzle, because some people don't have the time to go and personally meet the representative. It's, and you're expecting to dress nice and make connections, but just some people don't have that luxury of time to do that.
I have not an opposing view, but I have a different experience with the representatives. My school, we also had representatives come, but we weren't expected to dress nice. It was just come if you can. It was sort of an after school program. And we also had college fairs. And I loved that, because a lot of students in my school are not able to go in person and visit the colleges.
Oh yeah, that's kind of different from what we did. It wasn't an after school, and it's probably just my school in particular who is like, dress nice, make good impressions. We didn't have a college fair, I don't think. No, we never did. But it's very strange, like the weird relationship like my school has with some of the some other schools. Like we're like a preparatory academy, and there's kind of certain pipelines to certain schools. But this year with COVID, our numbers got like we typically get a decent amount of kids into UNC Chapel Hill, and I think we only got 3 this year. It's interesting.
Yeah, about visiting colleges, I think that's another huge problem I have with the application process is that you are expected to put your heart and soul and dedicate all your time into showing these colleges how much you're interested. Like going, a lot of people don't have the time or money to travel to a college to see what it's like over there, like especially if it's not in the same state. Like I think in Massachusetts we're lucky because we're like literally surrounded by colleges, but in other states, colleges can be pretty far away, especially in the bigger states. So gas money's expensive, what if you have to fly? You just can't realistically like expect all your students to be able to visit these colleges and then hold that against them in the application process, saying that they didn't seem interested enough. It's just not feasible.
I agree. And I think for that reason, that could be a good reason to support the interview process, but sort of reform it so that the applicant and the interviewer are on an equal footing. And the applicant can feel free to ask the interviewer as many questions, or I don't know, I'm trying to offer a different viewpoint, try to be devil's advocate. I think instead of an interview, and every applicant, well, that may be unreasonable, but maybe a group of applicants have a opportunity to speak to an admissions counselor and ask as many questions as possible, because the college application process can be so confusing. So I think if there was more communication between officers and students, that would ease the burden on students.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know that we have to get rid of college admissions interviews. I think reforming is good enough, and I think that that would be really helpful to make it something that's more beneficial for the students and not nerve-wracking and not, oh my God, my entire college experience hinges on this one interview. I think seeing it as an opportunity to get to know people on campus and sort of get to know what the college is like and ask questions, I think would be really helpful, both for the colleges to be able to sort of get students more interested in what they offer, but also for the students to be able to say, oh, that's cool, I didn't know that about Suffolk or whatnot, and then sort of are even more interested in the school because they got to ask those questions to someone who truly understands them and knows how other kids got in and knows how other students are doing, who they interviewed, and things like that. So they'll be able to sort of tell you a little bit more about the school. All right. So I think it's time to move on to our last question, which is, what advice do you have for students going into college admissions interviews?
Advice I have about college admissions is start applying early. Do not wait to the last minute. As soon as Common App opens, get started.
I absolutely agree. As it's probably because the applicant pool this year was so huge because of COVID, but I'm pretty sure the number of applicants in the regular decision pool really lowered my chances of getting in. And like all the people who applied early, they were getting into the college they wanted. So I know applying early sounds like it sucks, but like it can really boost your chances, I think.
Yeah, also know the difference between early action and early decision. Applying early action at schools is a great way to let them know that you're interested. That said, I applied early action, got waitlisted, and then got denied at Northeastern. So, maybe it won't be helpful to you. But if there's a college you're really interested in, apply early action. Early decision is binding. So if you get in, you have to go to that school. So be careful with early decision because, again, this is a whole other topic, but you don't always know if you can afford what they're going to make you pay. So always try and apply early action instead of early decision. And as far as interviews go in that application process, just be yourself and also come prepared with a list of questions. I know we said like not to be yourself or whatnot, but I really do think it's important to sort of be as authentic to you as you can, show that you care, and come with a list of questions, either written down or just in your head, of things that you want to ask and want to get to know about the school, because it'll show them that they're interested and it's their chance to interview you, but it's also your chance to interview the school. And so it's your opportunity to be able to ask those questions one-on-one that you've always wanted to ask about that school but never had the opportunity to.
My advice would be to stay motivated. Like, I know life can get you down. You're paying $75, $85, $55, $95 for these applications, and after your first failure, you're gonna want to quit. But don't sit here and squander your other opportunities at colleges that could be the one for you just because you didn't get into the one you didn't want. You got to stay motivated, you got to stick to it, and you got to finish those applications. Don't stay up till 2, 3 a.m. while you're still in school trying to do applications. Just pace yourself, and hopefully your school will give you time to do them in class. So yeah, just stay motivated.
My advice would be to not put all your eggs in one basket. That can really screw you over in the long term. Say you get denied, or in my case, your parents decide that they're not going to allow you to go to that school anymore. It just made everything so much more stressful. I personally applied to like 3 out of the 5 schools that I applied to. I applied pretty much the deadline for regular decisions. Luckily, I wasn't like going to any really selective schools, so I got in. So, don't do that. That was really stressful and not a good time. And just, if you're going into an interview, I really don't have much advice or personal experience to give you, but I think kind of going in and thinking it of like an interview, like it's not them interviewing you, but you interviewing them, I think that can really show them that you are someone that they want on their campus. So like go in, read the room, read the just read the room and have a list of questions, and be your own advocate. Don't talk down about yourself. You're that boss ass bitch, okay?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Like, in interviews, you need to be confident, because if you really believe in yourself and your achievements, or at least act like you do in the interview, then your interviewer is probably going to believe that too. And I also agree with having a list of questions. You need to have that to show that you are interested and you have thought really deeply about what this college has to offer, and you want to know more, and that's something they really look for.
All right, everybody. Thank you very much for your input, and thank you for joining us at the roundtable. A special thank you to the Suffolk University Summer Youth Symposium and Professor Nicholas Frangipane for their guidance and support, as well as to Suffolk University's Director of Undergraduate Admissions, Lark Krajewski, for being willing to be interviewed. All of our sources can be found in the description box below. Thank you for joining us on the Uncertainties of University.